Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. Thank you for joining us. This week we're going to be discussing the 1983 comedy classic, Risky Business, starring Tom Cruise and Rebecca De Mornay. For those of you guys just joining us for the first time, you can subscribe to our show, which we do every week, on YouTube at KD9575. You can also go on to our Facebook page, the original B Movie Club, and click the like button. You'll get all the latest information about the B Movie Club. You can also post questions and comments and make any movie suggestions you'd like. You can also reach me on Twitter at KD9575. This week, Risky Business. What a way to kick off the new year. As you know, last week we did Planet of the Apes. And that was our 52nd episode. There you go. So episode 53, starting a new year with Risky Business. In this story, you've got 17-year-old Joel Goodson, who's stressing out about getting ready for college. He's got interviews with Princeton. He's got finals. The world's coming apart. And his parents go out of town for the weekend. He's also very repressed. He doesn't have a girlfriend. So, in a moment of weakness, he goes ahead and contacts a young escort from the city, and she comes to visit him, and that's lovely Rebecca De Mornay. And she, after a few lovely evenings, she convinces him to basically open up his home to be a bordello, a brothel, so that they can both make money. So there you go. He goes from being super repressed and school-centric to, hey, now I'm Tom Cruise, the crazy pimp. Good times had by all. Of course, there's all sorts of other things going on. Obviously, hanging out with a hooker when you're 17, not the best of ideas. His dad's Porsche goes into Lake Michigan. He's kicked out of school. He fails the finals. He messes up his Princeton interview. Very upsetting. All the stuff from the house gets stolen, and yet amazingly, it all works out in the end. Spoiler alert, I don't want to mess it up for you. But parents arrive, and everything's hunky-dory. He even gets into Princeton. Amazing. So, I haven't seen this movie, and I swear to God, 30 years. And it's hysterical. It is great. It is vintage 1983. I guess we're supposed to think that Tom Cruise is kind of like this dorky little guy because it's like he's got a crazy haircut, but being in the 80s, everybody had dorky haircuts. I don't know if he's supposed to be cool, if he's supposed to be a nerd. I mean, his best friends later go on to play the roles Booger and Balky. So there you go. If you want to see young Curtis Armstrong, the man who played Booger in the Revenge of the Nerds movies, there he is. If you want to see Bronson Pinchot, who goes on to play Balky in Perfect Strangers, there he is as well. So, needless to say, when those two guys are your wingmen, maybe you do have to go digging through the ads for a hooker. So there you go. Tom Cruise looks like he's about 13 in this movie. He actually was not 13. He was in his early 20s. But to make him look more babyish, they had him work out 7 days a week and then had him stop working out and eat a lot of fat foods to give him kind of like, okay, you're athletic, but you're also kind of doughy, I guess. It's basically my workout routine as well. So there you go. People who were originally up for this role, they actually offered it to Timothy Hutton, who up to this point had also been in Taps with Tom Cruise like a year or so earlier. He turned it down. Nicolas Cage and Tom Hanks both went in and read for this role before they gave it to Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, as we know, was not the big star going into this movie. He'd done Endless Love in the 70s. He'd done, like I said, Taps. He was also in The Outsiders. And this movie really made his career. From this, he went on to do Top Gun, and there you go. He's Mr. Tom Cruise. What else can I tell you? While he was auditioning for Risky Business, he was still working on Outsiders, and he actually turned to Diane Lane, who was also in Outsiders, and vigorously recommended that she audition for the role of Lana, which went to Rebecca De Mornay. Diane Lane's parents said, "There's no way my daughter's going to play a 20-something hooker." So needless to say, no Diane Lane in this. Might have been an entirely different movie. Who knows? Rebecca De Mornay obviously went on to do like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle and some other things later on. Tom Cruise and her actually had a relationship for several years after this. So there you go. I remember watching this movie. And to this day, I don't know if she was ever interested in Tom Cruise or the characters were ever interested in Joel Goodson. By the way, his name's Goodson. Goodson? Yeah, good times. Anyway, because it's like, she's like, hey, I'll be your girlfriend if we can turn your house into a brothel. What do you think? And then I guess there was, like I told you, at the end of the movie, they're kind of walking off together, holding hands, and he got into Princeton, which was amazing considering he had a 3.14 grade point average. And the guy from Princeton comes to his house to interview him. Okay? I couldn't get the guys from San Diego State to come to my house. Okay? Anyway, a little too much information there. So, he gets into Princeton, so the future's looking bright. There's actually an alternate ending where he doesn't get into Princeton, and I guess he turns to the streets with Rebecca De Mornay. It's kind of down and depressing, so they decide to junk that idea. So there you go. Good times had by all. Risky Business, big hit. It kicked off the whole Wayfarers glasses that he wore in the movie. People were wearing them all over the place. I actually was still wearing them in college. Now that had nothing to do with Risky Business. That was just me being horribly out of style. But anyway, I can still dust those off from time to time. So there you go. Tom Cruise, I'll tell you what. He gets a lot of flack for a lot of different things. But I mean, he's been acting in movies for like 35 years. So he must be doing something right. Typically, I appreciate the roles that he's gone on to do, and this movie's no exception. It is streaming instantly on Netflix. Like I said, it's got an all-star cast. It's got Tom Cruise. It's got Rebecca De Mornay. It's got Balky and Booger. It's got Guido, the killer pimp, is played by Joe Pantoliano, who you might remember was in, I mean, I've actually been watching a ton of movies that he just pops up in. He is everywhere. He was in Sopranos more recently. He was in that movie Congo, which I just watched. Don't ask me why. I'm watching Running Scared with Billy Crystal. He's in that. You cannot throw a rock without hitting Joey Pantoliano. He was in Goonies, for goodness sake. Anyway, he's in this as well as the surprisingly gentle killer pimp who comes after Joel for stealing one of his girls. Actually, all of his girls. But he's surprisingly understanding. That's just how it works. Anyway, it is streaming instantly on Netflix. Check it out. It got a 98% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which means it's good. It's a comedy, but it also has like teen angst and drama and all sorts of things. So if you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. Next week, we're going to be going back to the horror genre. The Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, based upon the HBO TV series Tales from the Crypt, which were also based upon comic books back in the day, something I also know quite too much about probably. Starring Billy Zane and Jada Pinkett Smith and a lot of other people that you might recognize, but you're like, what's that person's name again? It's a horror, but it's also a comedy. It's also streaming instantly on Netflix, so check it out. Send in your questions and comments, as always, on our YouTube page, the B Movie Club, our Facebook page, the original B Movie Club, and on Twitter at KD9575. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. Joel, for heaven's sake, get off the babysitter! Thank you for joining us. Next week, Demon Knight, and be well.